So let's go ahead and take you back out to Dedham, Massachusetts. It does look like our Karen Reed retrial resuming now with the prosecution calling its final witness. This is crash reconstruction expert, Dr. Judson Welcher. You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC+.
The human body is governed by the same laws of physics, just like the bridge. Obviously, it's made of a lot of different materials, but in a human body, my beams are bones. My cables are the muscles and ligaments. Different material properties, but everything's governed by the laws of physics and principles of engineering. So I'm looking at how physical forces, the outside of the car, for when people are inside the car, seat belts, airbags. The first seat belt was patented by an engineer. It's engineers who quantify the force of the crash and what kind of injury, damage there is to the body. So it is force that causes damage like a fracture. And so we're looking at how the physical forces are applied to the body and what that means in terms of what happens to the body.
Dr. Welcher, I want to ask you a little bit about how you became a biomechanical engineer and an accident reconstructionist. Can you tell us?
Sure. So when I was getting ready to go to college, my father, who was a physician, said, whatever you do, do not go to medical school. Because I was getting ready to go to medical school. So this was 39 years ago, I believe. 35 years ago. 39 years ago. He said, it's just not worth it. So I said, okay. So then I entered into the mechanical engineering. I grew up riding motorcycles, taking things apart, frequently pissing my parents off when I couldn't put it back together. But I like taking things apart and figuring out how things worked. So I went to university and got my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering. From there, I happened to be at a Thursday meeting of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. A group came in from a company that did this type of work, and they showed some examples of how you apply engineering concepts that you learn in mechanical engineering to the human body. And so I was like, man, that's a great job. That's the perfect mix of engineering that I have and my desire, to learn the medical side of things as well without becoming a doctor. So I talked to them. I actually applied to the company and was ultimately hired as a biomechanical engineer.
How long did you continue as a biomechanical engineer until you went back to school?
So I actually, very quickly after I started the job, I took a human anatomy class at a community college. I quickly realized that wasn't enough. And so in around 1993, I went to the USC Medical School and enrolled through what's called concurrent enrollment, which means you can take the class, but you're not actually in medical school. It's a medical school class. But I took gross human anatomy. So it was me and 160 or so other doctors. I took the same human anatomy that first year medical students at USC took. So it began in 1993.
Did you continue to work as you pursued your higher education?
I ultimately started my own company, continued to work, continued to do research, had a wonderful opportunity to have 2 beautiful children, and continue to this day.
Tell us a little bit about the company you started and when.
Sure. So in about October of 1994, I started my own company. Me and the guy who was my immediate supervisor said, hey, we can do this better. We can do more research, more testing. And so we started our own company.
What kind of company was it?
It was an accident reconstruction and biomechanical engineering company. We also early on did a bunch of testing and design work for amusement park rides. The same concepts for car crashes applies to roller coasters, basically anything. So we worked and had some contracts on improving ride safety. And I was also on the ASTM committee that looked at amusement park ride designs.
Did that company grow from 2 people?
Correct. We took it from 2 to about 25 people, and then we ultimately sold it in right around January 1st of 2022.
Before 2022, did you obtain a master's degree?
I did.
And what was that in and where was that from?
So again, I was working full time. Actually, while I was doing my master's degree, I was also teaching classes at Texas A&M through their law enforcement training division, so it was extension classes. But I ultimately completed my master's thesis in December of 2001. That was from USC, University of Southern California, and I received my master's degree in biomedical engineering. I wrote my thesis. It was basically on automotive seat design, but it was titled Whiplash-Associated Disorders, Related Anatomy, Biomechanics of Injury, and the Relationship between Injury Potential and Automotive Seat Design.
Excuse me, Your Honor, if I may, pardon the interruption. If Dr. Welcher reads from his report, which I think he just did, can we know when he's doing that?
Sure. Dr. Welcher asked me if he could refer to his resume, and I said yes. So if you read, just let us know.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And it's my resume, not my report.
Your resume, did I say report?
No, you did. He said report.
Yeah, no, it's his resume.
You share with us that your company continued to grow until you ultimately sold it in 2022. During that time, did you continue to pursue higher education after you obtained your master's degree?
I did. So again, ever since 1993, I've been slowly pursuing higher education, both obtaining my master's degree as well as my PhD. During that time frame, I also published 20 peer-reviewed scientific publications. I taught for 5 years at Texas A&M and served as a peer reviewer for both the Society of Automotive Engineers and for a short period on the Archives of Physical Medicine. So I was working and running a company with my co-creator, as well as teaching, conducting research, publishing, also while going to school part-time.
Take us to 2011. Were you still pursuing education at the University of Southern California?
I was.
And what occurred? What did you achieve in 2011?
So in August of 2011, I finally obtained my PhD in biomedical engineering. I wrote my dissertation, reading from my resume, titled Development, Validation, and Testing of a New Sensor Array for Intra-Articular Pressure Measurement, In Vitro Human Lumbar Spine, Intra-Articular Facet Testing, which is a lot of big words to say. I was testing cadaver spines, looking at the loads inside the spines associated with various motions of the spine.
Did you achieve your PhD in biomechanical engineering?
It's actually in biomedical engineering. Biomechanics is within the field of biomedical engineering.
So you have a PhD in biomedical engineering.
Correct.
You mentioned that you have published many articles. Have there been articles that you have published that are relevant to some of the subjects that you're going to talk about during your testimony?
I mean, I have a number of, again, peer-reviewed scientific publications. Peer review just means you submit it to a journal and they have other people review it, give you comments, your peers in the field. I do believe there are a number of them that could certainly be relevant to both the physics and, for example, pedestrian injuries.
If I could mention a few. You wrote an article on sideswipe collision dynamics. What's sideswipe collision dynamics?
So I was actually an invited speaker at the World Congress, or sorry, not the World Congress, the World Reconstruction Expedition. They asked me to give a presentation on the theory, science, and mathematics behind sideswipe or side impact collisions. That would include side collisions, glancing collisions, shallow angle impacts such as like a corner of a bumper goes into the side of a car, any kind of glancing or clipping type impact.
Similarly, in many of the articles that you wrote, is one of them about methods for quantifying the impact severity of low-speed side impacts at varying angles?
It is.
Tell us a little bit what that
So that was a Society of Automotive Engineers paper, again, another peer-reviewed paper that we worked on. It was kind of an extension or continuation of all that research, where we just looked at the physics and the mathematics, basically the reconstruction of glancing or sideswipe type impacts.
Similarly, methods for quantifying the impact severity of low-speed side impacts at varying angles. Is that similar to the other papers, or was that different?
Yeah, I thought that was the same one.
if I can continue, another article or publication that you wrote, occupant kinematics and loading in low-speed lateral impacts. What does that mean?
So in the course of my career, I've done probably 12 to maybe 1,300 actual crash tests. I've crashed everything from skateboards, mopeds, up to trains, motorhomes, and ambulances. I've conducted, relative to this case, probably or been involved with 50 to maybe 70 pedestrian impact tests. So the low-speed side impact one is we actually put human volunteers in side impact collisions. And what we did is we had accelerometers, which are things that measure acceleration. If you had physics or memory, Newton told us force equals mass times acceleration. So knowing the acceleration of something, you can get an idea of how much force is applied to it. So we have various sensors on the body. We have various sensors on the car for the reconstruction aspects of it. So that study was the biomechanics portion, and the first paper you read about the reconstruction was the reconstruction portion. So the first paper you discussed was everything outside the car. Then we looked at how the forces applied to those impacts to people inside the car.
Have you had a lot of publications and studies about the force applied to people outside of a car?
I don't know if I'd say a lot, but I was an invited lecturer to the Accident Reconstruction and Collision Safety Institute conference, where I specifically gave a paper and a series, or basically a lecture, on what's called pedestrian impact biomechanics, which was exactly as the name implies, what happens to pedestrians when they're impacted predominantly by cars and vehicles.
How much of your work involves pedestrian impacts?
Probably maybe 10%, 5 to 10%. Most of it's car to cars.
Biomechanics of low-speed impacts. Is that another paper that you wrote?
That is a paper I wrote.
I don't want to read all of your papers and all of your publications, but on a different topic, did you write a paper on the study of the measurement of Generation 2 Toyota event data recorders and low-speed side impacts?
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about what measurement of event data means in this article?
So Toyotas, newer Toyotas particularly, have two types of electronic equipment on board that can record crashes. There is what's referred to as an event data recorder, or EDR. It's somewhat commonly referred to as a black box. It's not exactly right, but it's close. And then there's a secondary system, which is really more closely tied to maintenance. That's called TechStream, but it will pick up data that you can frequently relate back to various events. So that particular paper was looking at the event data recorder data in Toyotas.
We'll get more into that subject later, but is event data recorders a subject that you're well schooled at?
Yes.
In addition to the papers that you've written, have you continued through the years and after becoming a PhD, your research in this area, in these areas?
Correct. For example, every year we're part of a conference called SATI, which is our company, largely led by the engineer Christopher Furbish that we work with, has spearheaded us going out and conducting crash tests for that conference. For 10 years, we did a lot of the instrumentation and crash testing at the Accident Reconstruction and Collision Safety Institute conference. And then for a number of years, the company actually went down and did crash testing for what's referred to as the Spine Research Institute down in San Diego. So we've been hired by various professional organizations. We came out here once, the Massachusetts Association of Accident Reconstructionists, I think I'm messing the name up, had a conference. We came out here, conducted crash tests for training other experts out here. We did all the instrumentation, the biomechanics of that crash testing.
In your research and testing, you have pages with dates of the different researches and testing you've done. There's over a dozen of the research and testing items and articles that deal with pedestrians. Is that a common topic in your research and testing?
Yes. So again, frequently at the conference, we're doing pedestrian tests. The last Action Reconstruction Collision Safety Institute conference, there was a series of pedestrian crash tests run there. SAT-TI 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, some pedestrian crash tests that were done there as well. So there are a number of instances on my resume where I have both attended class, and then I mentioned the one time where I gave an hour and a half long lecture on pedestrian injuries.
After you became a PhD or a doctor, did you continue your education and research?
Correct. I've always continued my education and research up until, I just got back from the event data or Action Reconstruction Collision Safety Institute EDR conference, or the Event Data Recorder Summit. My company, through my relationship with the founder of that summit, was a sponsor. So Aperture was actually a sponsor of that conference. We actually sponsored it the previous year as well. And also as part of that, I assisted one of the researchers in conducting, it's called front camera module testing for pedestrian impacts on Chrysler vehicles. Excuse me, General Motors vehicles.
As a biomedical engineer, are there any groups, organizations, or certifications that are important?
I think ACTAR is important. So ACTAR is an acronym. It's ACTAR, and that's short for the Accreditation Commission for Traffic Accident Reconstructionists. And so it's a bunch of...
You've been watching here on Live Impact News the Karen Reed retrial with the prosecution's last witness, Dr. Judson Welcher, as they are evidently establishing his credibility to be such an expert.